Base intruder makes it aboard military aircraft of unit in charge of Air Force One. An intruder made it aboard an aircraft belonging to the unit responsible for Air Force One after entering Joint Base Andrews without authorization Thursday, leading to a security review of bases around the world, according to military officials. The individual gained unauthorized access to the flight line and entered a C-40 aircraft assigned to the 89th Airlift Wing, said a statement from Base Public Affairs Friday. Joint Base Andrews security forces responded, detained and interviewed the individual. The 89th Airlift Wing is responsible for flying the president aboard the VC-25 aircraft commonly referred to as Air Force One, as well as the vice president, cabinet members and other senior officials with its fleet of planes. No aircraft used by the president were at risk from the trespasser, a U.S. official told ABC News. The official said an Air Force historian checked the records and found no instance of a U.S. president flying aboard a C-40. The official added that the C-40 was on the flight line when the intruder entered. This suggests the plane was not in the immediate area of Air Force One, which would have been inside a hangar. The man was unarmed and did not harm any personnel, and there is no indication that the individual has any links to extremist groups, according to the statement. More. U.S. Air Force investigating intruder at Joint Base Andrews, home to Air Force One, after assisting with the interview. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations booked the man and gave him a federal summons for trespassing, the statement said. He was then turned over to local police due to having two outstanding warrants, it added. The OSI did not immediately respond to ABC News' request for comment and additional details. The Secretary-in-Chief of Staff of the Air Force directed the service's Inspector General to investigate the security breach. According to a statement released by the Air Force Friday afternoon, this review and investigation will also include their installations worldwide, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby said in a press briefing Friday. They're going to investigate this incident, but they're also going to take a look at security protocols across the force. Kirby told reporters that the base had already adjusted some of its security protocols by Friday morning but would not give details. More. Trump reveals historic redesign of Air Force One, exclusive. The security of our installation is paramount, said Colonel Roy Oberhaus, Vice Wing Commander of the 316th Wing at Joint Base Andrews. This was a serious breach of security, and Joint Base Andrews is investigating the incident to determine how this happened so it doesn't happen again. According to the Air Force, the C-40 aircraft is a nearly identical military version of the Boeing 737-700 business jet and is primarily used to transport combatant commanders as well as members of the cabinet and Congress. Joint Base Andrews is located in Prince George's County, Maryland, about a 14-mile drive southeast of Washington, D.C. President Joe Biden is scheduled to make his first flight aboard Air Force One from the base en route to Wilmington, Delaware, Friday evening. Biden says he doesn't think $15 minimum wage will survive in his COVID-19 relief proposal. President Joe Biden conceded that he does not believe he will be able to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour through his $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief proposal due to the Senate rules. I put it in, but I don't think it's going to survive, Biden told CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell in excerpts of an interview that aired Friday. The interview with CBS is his first for network television since taking office, and the full interview will air on Sunday. The president, who campaigned on raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, said he was prepared, on a separate negotiation on minimum wage, to work my way up. No one should work 40 hours a week and live below the poverty wage. And if you're making less than $15 an hour, you're living below the poverty wage, Biden said. Both chambers of Congress on Friday passed a budget resolution that sets the stage for Democrats to be able to use a process known as budget reconciliation to pass Biden's sweeping COVID-19 relief bill on a party line vote. Biden has said he is willing to go forward without the support of Republicans, but has said he's willing to make certain concessions if it will earn bipartisan support. A bipartisan deal is his preference, the president has said, but he has stressed the need to pass immediate and substantial relief to address the pandemic and economic crisis gripping the nation. Biden said in the interview aired Friday that he was prepared to negotiate on which Americans get the $1,400 stimulus checks in his proposal, but reiterated he was not willing to compromise on the size of the checks. But here's the deal. Middle-class folks need help, Biden said. But you don't need to get any help to someone making $300,000 or $250,000. He continued, so it's somewhere between an individual making up to $75,000 and phasing out, and a couple making up to $150,000 and phasing out. But again, I'm wide open on what that is. In addition to the $1,400 stimulus checks, the president's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief proposal to Congress includes more aid for the unemployed, the hungry, and those facing eviction. It includes increased funding for vaccinations and testing, and additional support for small businesses, states and local governments. In his first week in office, Biden signed an executive order that begins laying the groundwork to institute a $15 minimum wage for federal workers and contractors. Democratic lawmakers have pushed for years to raise the minimum wage, which now stands at $7.25 and hasn't been increased since 2009. Now the Democrats have narrow majorities in the House of Representatives and the Senate, as well as Biden in the White House. They are renewing their push. Separate from the measure in Biden's COVID-19 relief proposal, a coalition of lawmakers introduced a bill last week that would raise the national minimum wage to $15 an hour. The movement to raise the minimum wage has been met with steep opposition from Republicans and businesses leaders, who argue that boosting wages will force them to lay off workers. Woman arrested over Capitol riot allowed to take trip to Mexico. Judge rules a woman arrested in connection with the attack on the U.S. Capitol will be able to go on a prepaid trip to Mexico this month, after a judge granted her request Friday. Jenny Cudd, a flower shop owner in Midland, Texas, initially faced 2 misdemeanor charges entering a restricted building and violent or disorderly conduct after allegedly posting a social media video in which she boasted about participating in last month's Capitol riot. According to the FBI affidavit, she was released on a personal recognizance bond on January 21 under conditions that require any travel outside the continental United States be approved by the court. On Monday, her lawyer requested just that, as stated in the filed motion, before her alleged participation in the siege on the Capitol. Cudd had planned and prepaid for a weekend retreat with her employees in the Riviera Maya from February 18 to 21. This is a work-related bonding retreat for employees and their spouses, her lawyer, Farhina Siddiqui, wrote. In support of the request, Siddiqui noted that Cudd has no criminal history, is a U.S. citizen, had remained in constant contact with her attorney and, as ordered, is in contact with pretrial probation services. More, anatomy of the pro-Trump mob, how the former president's rhetoric galvanized a far-right coalition. According to the motion, Cudd's pretrial services officer has no objection to the travel request, and the prosecutor advised that the government takes no position on it. D.C. District Court Judge Trevor McFadden approved the request on Friday, noting in the order that Cudd has no criminal history and doesn't appear to be a flight risk or danger to others. She is required to give her trip itinerary to her pretrial services officer. Since the motion's filing, Cudd was indicted Wednesday on more serious charges, including obstruction of an official proceeding, a felony that carries a maximum prison sentence of 20 years and substantial fines if convicted. She faces 5 total charges as part of the terms of her pretrial release. Cudd is also ordered to stay away from Washington, D.C., except for matters pertaining to her case. and must notify the pretrial services agency of any travel outside of her home state of Texas. She was also ordered to surrender any passport to the agency and to not obtain a passport or any other international travel document. ABC News had reached out to her lawyer for comment after filing the motion but did not receive a response. More, House to vote to strip GOP Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of committee roles. Hoyer says Cudd, who unsuccessfully ran for mayor of Midland in 2019, is an established member of her community, the motion stated. Authorities identified her in a photo posing inside the Capitol building on January 6. She also made statements in a since-removed Facebook live stream indicating her admission of entering the U.S. Capitol, the FBI affidavit stated, including allegedly being a part of the crowd that stormed the Capitol and broke into House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office, according to the affidavit. Cudd said in the video, "We did break down Nancy Pelosi's office door, and somebody stole her gavel and took a picture sitting in the chair flipping off the camera. I am proud of my actions. I have charged the Capitol today with Patriots today. Hell yes, I am proud of my actions," Cudd allegedly said. According to the affidavit, Cudd went to the Capitol after attending former President Donald Trump's January 6 Save America rally, held near the White House as Congress gathered to certify the election of President Joe Biden. More Cowboys for Trump leader, far-right video blogger among Capitol siege arrests. The affidavit also referenced a January 8 interview Cudd gave to a local news station, during which she reportedly said, "We the Patriots did storm the U.S. Capitol. Yes, I would absolutely do it again." As of January 26, the Department of Justice has identified 400 suspects and charged 135 in connection with the attack on the Capitol. U.S. pharmacies could administer up to 100 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine a month. Here's how shipments of COVID-19 vaccines will be headed to pharmacies next week under a federal program that aims to get more people vaccinated quickly. 21 national pharmacy partners and networks of independent pharmacies representing over 40,000 pharmacy locations nationwide are taking part in the program, according to a government fact sheet, which includes a list of all participating pharmacies or networks. In Phase 1 of the distribution plan, 1 million doses will be sent out to about 6,500 stores including Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, Publix pharmacies, and others. Starting on February 11, many pharmacies already vaccinate people against a number of illnesses including the flu and shingles. Some experts have suggested that pharmacies nationwide will have the capacity to administer 100 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine once supply is available. Based on conservative assumptions, pharmacies have the capacity to meet the demand for 100 million vaccine doses in 1 month when that level of a vaccine supply is available. Stephen Anderson, president and CEO of the National Association of Chain Drug Stores, told reporters last month, "Pharmacies are also readily accessible in most communities, with most Americans living within 5 miles of a pharmacy." White House COVID-19 response coordinator Jeff Zients said earlier this week, Phase 1 will include only some pharmacies in certain states. The pharmacies that will have the vaccine are selected by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in states, taking into account their ability to reach some of the populations most at risk for severe illness from COVID-19, including socially vulnerable communities, according to Zients. In the early phase, many pharmacies across the country will not have vaccine or may have very limited supply, Zients said Tuesday. CVS and Walgreens will be getting a large share of the first shipment of vaccinations. Starting Thursday, CVS said it will be offering doses to people eligible in some of its stores in 11 states, including California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Texas, and Virginia. CVS will have about a quarter of the total initial million doses. Walgreens said it will begin offering vaccines on February 12 in 15 states, including Chicago and other places in Illinois, Connecticut, Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, New Hampshire, New Mexico, New York, including New York City, North Carolina, Puerto Rico, Vermont, Wisconsin and West Virginia. Not every CVS or Walgreens pharmacy in these states will have the vaccine in this initial phase. However, as more supply becomes available, the company will expand to additional states while increasing the number of stores offering vaccinations, CVS said in a news release. Walmart will be offering the vaccine in some of its stores in Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Maine, Minnesota, Missouri, Mississippi, Nebraska, Nevada, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Louisiana and Wyoming. Once a store or club receives allocation, our online scheduler will be available to make appointments, Walmart said in a statement. Walmart said last month that it expects it will be able to administer 10 million to 13 million doses per month when supply and allocations allow across its more than 5,000 pharmacies in the United States and Puerto Rico. CVS has said it eventually expects to be able to administer as many as 20 million to 25 million shots per month across its nearly 10,000 stores. You must be eligible to get a vaccine before booking an appointment. The pharmacies in the program will follow the state's guidelines and only vaccinate people who are eligible in that state. Most states have followed the CDC's recommendation and are offering vaccines to frontline workers and the elderly in long-term care facilities right now. Appointments can be made online or by phone. Experts are hopeful that vaccination appointments will eliminate wait times for clients and make the process similar to getting a flu vaccination at your local drugstore. There is normally a 15-minute wait time after getting the COVID-19 shot, which is in place to make sure people don't have an allergic reaction. Appointments can be made online or by phone. At Walgreens, appointments can be booked through a vaccine scheduler. The CVS website lets you search by state. Requiring everyone to have an appointment will also help stores make sure people are socially distanced and that there's no crowding. Vaccines are by appointment, so we know how many people will need to be observed, a Walmart spokesperson told CNN in an email. In locations where Walmart will host vaccination clinics, it will have floor decals to mark social distancing. Stores will also space out chairs so people are socially distant. Everyone will be able to get the vaccine at no cost, even people who have no health insurance or are underinsured. Challenges include supply and staffing. Vaccine supply at this stage is the main challenge. There will only be 1 million doses sent to drugstores at first, and it's not clear if or when the allocation to drugstores will be increased. That will ramp up over time as more supply becomes available. CVS has hired around 10,000 pharmacy technicians to administer vaccines and coronavirus testing, Michael DeAngelis, a CVS spokesman, said. It plans to have around 90,000 employees, including pharmacists, licensed pharmacy technicians and nurses, administering vaccines. Walmart has not put a number on how many pharmacy staff members it will need to add for vaccine administering, but it is offering current staff a bonus for referring qualified candidates, a Walmart spokesperson told CNN in an email. Supply constraints and a patchwork system of vaccine eligibility by states are not the only challenges facing these chains and their staff. The pharmacy chains are also preparing for misinformation online about the vaccine as well. Giant Eagle, which has more than 400 stores in 5 states, has prepared talking points for its more than 600 pharmacists who will administer the vaccine. The goal is to help combat false information about the virus, Victor Verkaman, chief pandemic officer at the chain, said in an interview last month. We are also doing our best to educate the public, to help them sift through what might be on social media, what might be factual, what might be opinion, around topics like COVID vaccine safety, he said. Pharmacies are ready, trade group says once the supply of vaccine is available. Pharmacies around the country could be vaccinating 7 people an hour and 100 million a month, even with current staffing, according to the National Association of Chain Drug Stores. The group's model assumes that 40,000 chain pharmacies, including traditional drug stores like CVS and Walgreens, grocery stores like Kroger, and large retailers such as Walmart and Costco, can administer 3.3 million vaccinations per day. The model does not include independent pharmacies in the United States that will also administer the vaccine and are part of the federal partnership. If all of the nearly 17,000 independent pharmacies that give immunizations had the vaccine, they could administer approximately 1.28 million per day, according to the National Community Pharmacists Association. NASA's Perseverance pays off back home. A laser light sensor that can identify bacteria in a wound may sound far-fetched, but it's already becoming a reality, thanks in part to NASA's Mars exploration program. The technology is going to Mars for the first time on Perseverance, which will touch down on the red planet this month. But it's already detecting trace contaminants in pharmaceutical manufacturing, wastewater treatment, and other important operations on Earth. That's not the only technology headed to Mars that's already paying dividends on the ground. Here on Earth, these innovations are also improving circuit board manufacturing and even led to a special drill bit designed for geologists. Giving geologists a break. Honeybee Robotics has been working on robotic missions to Mars and other planetary bodies since the 1990s, including a number of projects funded by Small Business Innovation Research (SBIR) contracts from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. One of the key contributions to come from that work has been sample collection technology, including a drill bit for extracting raw cores. Half a dozen coring bits developed from research that started more than 20 years ago are now in space for the first time, ready for use in the rover's turret, or hand, at the end of its robotic arm. On Earth, after drilling a core with a hollow bit, a geologist usually uses a screwdriver or other tool to break the sample off and pull it out. This can result in a fragmented or even contaminated sample. A robot required something different. New York-based Honeybee came up with a break-off tube nested within a coring bit. After the core has been drilled, the break-off tube rotates relative to the bit, shifting its central axis and snapping off the core. Unlike other break-off methods, such as pinching the base of the core, the break-off tube applies pressure along the length of the sample, reducing the risk of fragmentation. Honeybee has supplied grinders, scoops, and other sampling systems that flew on previous Mars missions. This is the first time the company's coring bit technology is going to Mars, because it's the first time NASA has planned a future mission to bring samples of the Martian surface back to Earth. Perseverance will collect and package those samples. It's the key part of the sample return mission, said Keith Rosette, who managed the rover's sampling and caching system for JPL. You truly can't collect a sample on Mars if you don't have a drill bit that can retrieve it. While getting a sample return vehicle home from Mars will pose a host of challenges. It will let researchers do virtually unlimited testing with a wide array of instruments, Rosette said, rather than trying to bring all those instruments to Mars. It's less challenging and even more valuable to bring samples back. Meanwhile, Honeybee has commercialized its patented break-off bits in coring toolkits for geologists on Earth. The bits can be used with a standard drill, making the technology easy and affordable, said Chris Zachney, Honeybee Vice President and Director of Exploration Technology. Honeybee has also been in talks with companies interested in using the bits for nuclear disaster remediation where it is too dangerous to send in human investigators, Zachney said. If there are concrete tanks that are leaking, for example, then robots can go in and take samples to check radiation levels. The technology was invented by Honeybee's late chief engineer Tom Myrick. Tom would have been extremely proud that his invention made a difference to planetary missions, said Zachney. home videos from Mars collecting samples for return to Earth isn't the only first that engineers have planned for Perseverance. For the first time, NASA has built a system that could send back high-quality video of a rover's dramatic entry and landing sequence. While the Curiosity rover sent back a series of compressed images showing the Martian surface during descent, Perseverance's entry, descent, and landing package includes 6 high-definition cameras and a microphone that aims to capture all the drama of the 7 minutes of terror between hitting the outer atmosphere and touching down. In addition to watching the planet's surface, the cameras are positioned to watch the parachutes unfold and also to look back at the descent stage and down at the rover as the two separate. The camera components are off-the-shelf models, but the circuit board that manages their interface and power was designed by JPL. It was then built by San Francisco-based Tempo Automation. Founded in 2013, just after NASA announced the Mars 2020 mission, Tempo used the work to improve its manufacturing processes. As its name suggests, Tempo Automation's focus is rapid, automated production of printed circuit boards, even in small batches. One set of tools the company offers to that end is the process for making every component traceable, to keep track of who touched it and what was done to it at each point in the board production process, as well as which component lot the piece came from. This information makes it easier to zero in on the cause of a problem and see what other boards might have been affected, said Tempo co-founder Shashank Samala. To meet JPL's stringent documentation requirements, Tempo added X-ray images, ionic cleanliness data, and data from an automated optical inspection for every component, all of which is now part of the company's standard procedure. A tool unique to Tempo is what it calls fabrication simulation, software that translates a computer-aided design CAD model into a photorealistic representation of what the final board will look like. A team was prototyping the tool when the JPL work began in early 2018, and that work helped them complete it, said Samala. It debuted the following year. The simulation lets customers check their designs for any issues or flaws before production begins, he said. A simple mistake can cost a lot of money and time. While it was conceived to help customers finalize their designs, the company discovered that it was useful in-house as well. The manufacturing process can result in discrepancies between the original CAD model and the final product, Samala explained. The simulation serves as a source of truth on the factory floor. To communicate the designer's intent, the first thing we look at is the simulation, he said. Delivering a product that met NASA standards has helped the company get into several other space systems, including satellites and rockets. Meanwhile, Chris Bassett, who designed the circuit board at JPL, looks forward to the moment the camera footage is beamed back from Mars after Perseverance's landing February 18, 2021. This is so far outside of what we usually do that it's super exciting, he said. I can't wait to see those images. Ultraviolet lasers scan for chemical clues, another technology whose roots reach far back into NASA's Mars exploration program, is also flying for the first time on Perseverance and has many potential applications here on Earth. When two longtime colleagues founded Photon System in 1997, research showed incredible promise for spectrometers, devices that use light to determine a sample's composition, operating at deep ultraviolet UV wavelengths. These had the potential to identify a bacteria or detect even the slightest chemical traces. But sources for light in the 220 to 250 nanometer range were too large, heavy, and sensitive to environmental interference, and had many other issues. William Hugg and Ray Reed set out to develop a miniature, lightweight, rugged, deep UV laser source for spectroscopy in the field. Their first outside investment came in 1998 from a pair of SBIR contracts with JPL, which was interested in a spectrometer that could detect nucleic and amino acids, organic materials that are foundational to all known life. Since then, the Covina, California-based company has received a number of NASA SBIRs, mostly with JPL. as well as funding from NASA programs aimed at developing instruments for planetary and astrobiology science. Now the space agency will get the first big returns on its long investment in the technology. Perseverance is equipped with the Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals (SHERLOC) instrument, which uses a photon systems laser to spot previously invisible clues in its search for signs of past life on Mars, while the team doesn't expect to find bacteria on Mars. Organics that exist in the near surface can be identified using SHERLOC. On Earth, the same technology can be used to identify organics for a variety of other purposes. Deep UV photons interact strongly with many materials, especially ones containing organic molecules. This results in higher detection sensitivity and greater accuracy when compared with infrared or even visible light laser sources. Deep UV spectroscopy has been done in research labs, but Hug and Reed came up with a construction that was far smaller, simpler, and cheaper to build than any existing alternative. Deep UV lasers start at $100,000. That's why they're not used in industry, Hug said, noting that laboratory instruments using the technology might take up 3 laboratory tables and take a month to set up. One major challenge has been the level of perfection the technology requires. The same sensitivities that enable tiny, high-energy wavelengths to detect even a virus make them vulnerable to the slightest defects. A microscopic imperfection in a lens or other surface can disrupt or scatter them. And Hug said it has taken advances across multiple industries to meet the necessary standards. Photon Systems focuses on 2 types of spectroscopy where deep UV laser sources provide major advantages over long-standing spectrometer technology, and SHERLOC will use both. Fluorescence spectroscopy observes the light that most organic and many inorganic materials emit when excited by certain ultraviolet wavelengths, just like detergent glowing under a black light. Each emits a distinct spectral fingerprint. Raman spectroscopy, on the other hand, observes the light that a molecule scatters, some of which will shift to different wavelengths due to interaction with molecular bond vibrations within the sample. These shifts in wavelength can be used to identify the materials in a sample. The higher energy photons of UV light elicit a much stronger Raman scattering signal from organic molecules than lower frequency light. And because deep UV light isn't present in natural fluorescence or in sunlight, using these very short wavelengths eliminates sources of interference. In recent years, the company has started developing the technology into products including handheld sensors and devices that monitor personal exposure to contaminants, as well as lab equipment. Their biggest markets now are in the pharmaceutical, food processing, and wastewater treatment industries, said Hug. Deep UV can identify and measure certain compounds at much lower concentrations than any other method, offering unprecedented precision and quality control. Whether measuring the active ingredients in pharmaceuticals or ensuring the cleanliness of machinery and facilities. In wastewater treatment, the technology can identify and measure contaminants, letting the operator tailor the treatment process and save on power for ozone infusion and aeration. For a small wastewater treatment plant, the whole system pays for itself in less than a month, Hug said. An application the military has invested in is identifying bacteria and viruses. Figuring out which bacteria are present in a wound, for example, would help pinpoint the right antibiotic to treat it rather than using broad-spectrum antibiotics that risk causing drug resistance. And rapid, affordable deep UV spectroscopy holds promise for medical research, from diagnostics to identifying proteins, peptides, and other biological material. NASA has been a constant companion in our journey to date, and the laser is only part of the story, said Hug. It's also the deep UV Raman and fluorescence instruments we built for NASA and the Department of Defense over the years that are now providing breakthroughs for pharma, wastewater, and water quality in general, and now clinical testing for viruses. On Mars, SHERLOC will look for organic materials and analyze the minerals surrounding any possible signs of life so researchers can understand their context, said Luther Beagle, principal investigator for SHERLOC at JPL. This will provide more details about the history of Mars and also help to identify samples for return to Earth. The instrument, which also includes a camera capable of microscopic imaging, will be able to map the rock's mineral and organic composition in high detail, providing lots of important data. We're going to make a brand spanking new measurement on Mars, Beagle said. This is something that's never even been attempted before. We think we're really going to move the needle on Mars science and find some great samples to bring back. NASA has a long history of transferring technology to the private sector. The agency's spin-off publication profiles NASA technologies that have transformed into commercial products and services, demonstrating the broader benefits of America's investment in its space program. Spin-off is a publication of the Technology Transfer Program in NASA's Space Technology Mission Directorate. Donald Trump quits Screen Actors Guild amid disciplinary action. Donald Trump has quit America's Screen Actors Guild after it launched a disciplinary hearing into him, citing the U.S. Capitol attack. "Who cares?" the former U.S. president wrote in a letter, adding that the union had done nothing for me. "Thank you," was the Guild's brief response. Mr. Trump has appeared in a number of films, including Home Alone 2 and Zoolander. He also hosted the U.S. version of The Apprentice TV show. Last month, the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, SAG-AFTRA, said its disciplinary committee would meet to decide what action should be taken regarding Mr. Trump's role in the Capitol riot in Washington, D.C. on the 6th of January. 5 people died and dozens were injured during the pro-Trump siege. Canada broadcaster defends cutting Trump from film. How will history remember Trump? Donald Trump attacked the values that this union holds most sacred: democracy, truth, respect for our fellow Americans of all races and faiths, and the sanctity of the free press, said SAG-AFTRA President Gabrielle Carteris. There's a straight line from his one disregard for the truth to the attacks on journalists perpetrated by his followers, she said. SAG-AFTRA represents about 160,000 actors, journalists and other media professionals in the U.S. Mr. Trump, a Guild member for more than 30 years, was expected to be expelled at a forthcoming disciplinary meeting. The union shared his resignation letter, which was addressed to its president, a former star of Beverly Hills 90210, on its website. I write to you today regarding the so-called disciplinary committee hearing aimed at revoking my union membership. Who cares? Mr. Trump wrote. While I'm not familiar with your work, I'm very proud of my work on movies such as Home Alone 2, Zoolander and Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, and television shows including The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Saturday Night Live, and of course, one of the most successful shows in television history, The Apprentice, to name just a few. Mr. Trump added that he had greatly helped the cable news business, which he described as dying platform with not much time left before he took to politics. He then branded the disciplinary action a blatant attempt at free media attention to distract from your dismal record. On the 13th of January, Mr. Trump became the first president in U.S. history to be impeached twice, after the U.S. House of Representatives accused him of encouraging violence with false claims of election fraud. He now faces a trial in the Senate. Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, and Blumenauer unveil bill pushing Biden to declare national climate emergency. We are out of time. 3 progressive lawmakers introduced legislation Thursday that would require President Joe Biden to declare a national climate emergency, arguing that the U.S. is out of time and excuses to deal with the climate crisis. The National Climate Emergency Act, introduced by Democratic reps Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York and Earl Blumenauer of Oregon, along with independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, would direct Biden to declare a national emergency under the National Emergencies Act of 1976, allowing him to unlock sweeping presidential powers and be able to organize resources to mitigate climate change. They had introduced a similar resolution in 2019, but it had little hope of advancing in the Republican-led Senate and under former President Donald Trump. Now, the lawmakers have re-energized their efforts under a new administration committed to combating climate change with an ambitious plan to do so. President Biden has done an outstanding job of prioritizing climate in the first days of his administration, but after years of blatant ignorance from Trump and congressional Republicans, an even larger mobilization is needed, Blumenauer said in a statement unveiling the proposal. If passed, the bill would require Biden to provide Congress with a report detailing the executive branch's actions in combating the climate crisis. The bill would push the executive branch to upgrade infrastructure, modernize buildings to curb pollution, and protect public lands, among other investments. We've made a lot of progress since we introduced this resolution 2 years ago, but now we have to meet the moment. We are out of time and excuses, Ocasio-Cortez said in the statement. She added, "Our country is in crisis and, to address it, we will have to mobilize our social and economic resources on a massive scale." The Center for Biological Diversity, an organization backing the bill, said in a statement that declaring a climate emergency would allow Biden to be able to redirect military funds to build clean energy systems, marshal private industry for clean technology manufacturing, generate millions of high-quality jobs, and finally put an end to dangerous crude oil exports. Ocasio-Cortez and Blumenauer had previously cast their 2019 resolution as a necessary start to a long fight for implementing key parts of the Green New Deal climate change proposal.